She boarded the plane with tears in her eyes, holding a one-way ticket to her grandmother's funeral. 16-year-old Emma Carter wasn't looking for trouble. She just wanted to get to Atlanta and say goodbye. But within minutes of sitting in her first-class seat, the world showed her something far crueler than grief. A flight attendant looked at her natural curls, her thrift store hoodie, and decided she didn't belong there. That single judgment started a chain of events that would not only humiliate Emma in front of hundreds, but almost cost her life. Her inhaler was taken away. Her medical bracelet was mocked. And as she gasped for air, fighting for every breath, strangers pulled out their phones, recording what would soon become one of the most shocking videos in airline history. But here's what no one knew. The man calling her phone over and over again wasn't just her father. He was Captain William Carter, the man who ran Delta's entire flight operation. And when he found out what had happened to his daughter, he didn't just demand justice. He changed the entire airline industry forever. This is the true story of how one girl's humiliation at 30,000 feet became a global movement, and how a father's power and love turned discrimination into a new era of accountability. Let me tell you about a girl named Emma Carter, just 16 years old, a black teenager from New York with natural curls pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a thrift store hoodie that had seen better days. But none of that matters, does it? Because Emma is a person, a human being, and on this particular morning at JFK Airport, she's carrying something heavier than any suitcase, the weight of grief. Her grandmother had passed away, the woman who used to braid her hair on Sunday mornings, the woman who made the best peach cobbler in all of Georgia, the woman who told Emma she could be anything she wanted to be in this world. And now Emma has to fly to Atlanta to say goodbye. Her father knew how hard this would be. He wanted his baby girl to travel comfortably, to have some peace on one of the worst days of her young life. So he did something special. He bought her a first-class ticket, Seat 2A, right up front. When Emma boards Delta Flight 447 that morning, she's thinking about her grandmother's smile. She's thinking about the funeral ahead. She's thinking about how empty the world feels without that warm voice on the other end of the phone. She's not thinking about what's about to happen. Emma finds her seat, 2A, right there by the window in first class. The leather is soft. The space is generous. For just a moment, she feels like her father's arms are around her, telling her it's going to be okay. But then she notices it. The look. A flight attendant named Susan Miller is staring at her. And it's not a welcoming look. It's not a, "Can I get you something to drink?" look. It's a look that says, "You don't belong here." Emma has seen that look before. Most black kids have. It's the look you get when you walk into a fancy store. The look you get when you're in a neighborhood that doesn't expect to see you. The look that makes you feel like you're guilty of something you didn't do. Susan walks over, her smile tight and false. "Excuse me," she says, her voice dripping with something that isn't quite politeness. "Are you sure you're supposed to be sitting here?" Emma looks up confused. "Yes, ma'am. This is my seat." "Aha!" Susan's eyes scan Emma's hoodie, her worn sneakers, her simple backpack. "Can I see your ticket, please?" Now, let's pause here for a second, because this is important. Emma is 16. She's grieving. She's alone. And she's being questioned like a criminal for sitting in the seat that's printed on her boarding pass. She pulls out her ticket with trembling hands, shows it to Susan. Seat 2A. Right there in black and white. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? Wrong. Susan looks at the ticket, looks at Emma, looks at the ticket again, and then she says something that makes Emma's stomach drop. "I'm going to need you to move to the back." What? Emma's voice is small now. Other passengers are starting to notice. "There's been a mistake," Susan says louder now, making sure everyone can hear. "You're going to need to take seat 23F. In the main cabin." Main cabin. That's airline speak for coach. Emma wants to disappear. She wants to evaporate into the air conditioning vents. Every eye in first class is on her now. Some people look uncomfortable. Some look away. Some look like they're thinking exactly what Susan is thinking. But this is my seat, Emma whispers. My dad bought this ticket for me. Susan's smile gets even tighter. Ma'am, please don't make a scene. Just gather your things and move to your assigned seat. Assigned seat, as if the ticket in Emma's hand means nothing. What do you do in that moment? You're 16. You're alone. There's an authority figure telling you to move. Everyone is watching. Your heart is pounding so hard you can feel it in your throat. Emma gathers her backpack. She stands up, and she walks down the aisle, through business class, through the curtain that separates the good seats from the regular ones, all the way to row 23. Seat F, middle seat, squeezed between two strangers. The walk takes maybe 30 seconds, but it feels like a lifetime. She slides into 23F and stares at the seat in front of her. Her eyes burn, but she won't cry. She won't give anyone that satisfaction. She's going to her grandmother's funeral with dignity, even if a stranger in a uniform just tried to strip it away. Emma sits there, feeling everything at once. The grief of losing her grandmother. The humiliation of being moved like she didn't matter. The exhaustion of always having to prove you belong. The anger that sits in her chest like a stone. She thinks about texting her dad. But what would she say? Hey, Dad, thanks for the first class ticket, but they made me move because I don't look like I belong there. How do you put that kind of hurt into words? So she sits, and she waits, and she tries to breathe normally, but breathing is getting harder. See, Emma has asthma, has had it since she was 7. Most of the time, it's manageable. She carries her inhaler everywhere, knows the signs when an attack is coming. The tightness in her chest, the feeling like there's a hand squeezing her lungs. And right now, with the stress and the humiliation and the grief all piling up on her 16-year-old shoulders, she can feel it starting. Her chest tightens. Her breath comes shorter. She reaches into her backpack for her inhaler, the blue one, the one that saved her life more times than she can count. Around her, passengers are still boarding, stuffing bags into overhead bins, settling into their seats. The normal chaos of a flight, getting ready to leave. Emma finds her inhaler, shakes it, brings it to her lips, and that's when Susan Miller appears again. What is that? Susan's voice cuts through the cabin noise. Emma looks up, inhaler still in her hand. It's my inhaler. I have asthma. Susan's eyes narrow. She reaches out and before Emma can react, snatches the inhaler from her hand. I don't think so, Susan says. You're not bringing drugs onto this plane. The words hit Emma like a slap. Drugs? Drugs? No, please. Emma's voice is rising now, panic creeping in. It's my medicine. I have asthma. I need it. Sure you do. Susan turns the inhaler over in her hands like it's evidence at a crime scene. Emma's breathing is getting worse now. The panic isn't helping. She holds up her left wrist where she's wearing a medical ID bracelet, the kind that people with serious conditions wear. It's simple, metal, with red lettering that clearly says, asthma. Look, Emma gasps, look at my bracelet. It says, Susan glances at it and actually laughs. Not a kind laugh. A dismissive, cruel laugh. Nice try, sweetheart, she says, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Those fake jewelry bracelets don't fool me. I know your type. Your type. Those 2 words hang in the air like poison. Emma's chest is really tight now. She can feel her airway constricting, the familiar terror of not being able to get enough oxygen. She's had asthma attacks before, but never like this. Never when someone has taken away the one thing that can help her. Please, she whispers, tears starting to form. I can't breathe. Around her, Other passengers are beginning to notice. A woman across the aisle puts down her phone. A man 2 rows up turns around. The energy in the cabin is shifting from pre-flight boredom to uncomfortable awareness. Something is very wrong here, and everyone is starting to see it. A woman named Tina Ramirez, sitting across the aisle in seat 23C, has been watching this whole thing unfold. She's a mother of 3. She knows what a scared child looks like, and she knows injustice when she sees it. Tina pulls out her phone, opens Instagram, and hits the live button. "This is not okay," she says into her camera, her voice shaking with anger. "There's a teenage girl on my flight who's having an asthma attack, and the flight attendant just took her inhaler. She's just a kid." Within seconds, people are watching. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Further back in the cabin, a retired doctor named Henry Chun is reading a medical journal. He hears the commotion, sees Emma struggling to breathe, and his training kicks in immediately. He unbuckles his seatbelt and rushes forward. "I'm a doctor," he says firmly to Susan. "That girl is having a real asthma attack. You need to give her the inhaler back. Now." Susan barely looks at him. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat. She can't breathe." Dr. Chen's voice rises. "This is a medical emergency." "I have the situation under control," Susan says coldly. And then she does something that nobody can believe. She calls for TSA. "We're going to need officers to meet this plane at the gate," she says into her radio. "We may have a passenger under the influence." Under the influence. A 16-year-old girl with asthma. Having a medical emergency. Being treated like a criminal. Emma is crying now, gasping for air between sobs. Her vision is getting spotty. She knows this feeling. This is bad. This is really bad. And then her phone starts buzzing. BZZZZ, BZZZZ, BZZZZ. She looks down through blurry eyes. The screen lights up with a name. "Dad, incoming call." She doesn't answer. Can't answer. Needs all her focus just to breathe. BZZZZ, BZZZZ, BZZZZ. "Dad, incoming call." Again, and again, and again. Her father knows something is wrong. Somehow he knows. Emma's shaking hand reaches for the phone. She needs her dad, even if she can't talk. Even if all he hears is her struggling to breathe. She needs him. She hits the green button, puts it on speaker, because she can't hold it to her ear. And the entire cabin, every passenger, every crew member, everyone watching Tina's live stream, hears a voice that changes everything. A calm voice. A commanding voice. A voice that carries the weight of authority and the fury of a father whose child is in danger. This is Captain William Carter, Chief of Flight Operations for Delta Airlines. The cabin goes dead silent. Who am I speaking with, and why is my daughter having a medical emergency on one of my planes? Susan Miller's face turns the color of snow, and that's when everyone realized that the story was about to go somewhere nobody expected. What happens when the most powerful man in the airline discovers that his daughter has just been humiliated and endangered by his own employee? When a father's love meets professional authority at 30,000 feet. When a moment of injustice becomes a moment that will change everything. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you. Remember that voice? That calm, commanding voice coming through Emma's phone on speaker? This is Captain William Carter, Chief of Flight Operations for Delta Airlines. Let's just sit with that for a moment. Because Susan Miller, the flight attendant who just confiscated a teenage girl's asthma inhaler, who accused her of bringing drugs onto the plane, who called her a liar, is standing there frozen. Her hand is still holding Emma's inhaler. Her face has gone from righteous certainty to pure, ice-cold terror. She knows that title, Chief of Flight Operations. That's not just some pilot. That's the person who oversees thousands of flights. The person who sets policy. The person who can end careers with a single phone call. and she just humiliated his daughter. The cabin is silent in a way that feels almost supernatural. 100 people holding their breath at once. Even the engine noise seems quieter. Captain Carter's voice comes through the phone again, and you can hear both things in it, the professional control of someone who commands aircraft and the barely restrained fury of a father whose child is in danger. Ms. Miller, he says, and the way he says her name makes it clear he knows exactly who's standing there. I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Why has my 16-year-old daughter's medical device been confiscated? Susan's mouth opens. Nothing comes out. She looks like she's trying to reboot her brain. I thought, sir, my daughter has asthma. Captain Carter cuts her off, his voice sharp as a blade. She's wearing a medical ID bracelet that states this clearly. She presented you with a properly prescribed rescue inhaler, and instead of following basic medical protocol, you accused her of drug possession. Is that correct? Tina's live stream is capturing every second of this. The view count is climbing. 5,000 viewers, 10,000, 20,000. People are sharing it in real time. Emma is still struggling to breathe, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Chun is trying to help her, coaching her breathing, but without the inhaler, there's only so much he can do. Talk to me, Emma. Her father's voice softens when he addresses her. Baby, I need you to try to calm your breathing. I know it's hard. I know you're scared. But Daddy's coming, okay? I'm coming right now. Wait. Coming? Susan's eyes go wide. Sir, where are you? I just landed at Hartsfield, Jackson. Captain Carter says, from Denver. Gate C-14. And your aircraft is scheduled for Gate C-22. That's a 3-minute walk. The implication crashes through the cabin like a thunderclap. He's here. He's in Atlanta. He's not on the phone from some distant city. He's in the same airport. And he's on his way. Sir, I can explain. Susan starts, but Captain Carter isn't done. You violated federal safety regulations. His voice is like steel now. You violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. You violated our company's conduct policy. And Ms. Miller? You're doing all of this on camera. Susan's head whips around. She sees Tina holding up her phone, sees the red light that means recording, sees other passengers with their phones out too. That live stream you're currently featured in? Captain Carter continues. It has 600,000 viewers right now. 600,000 people watching you deny medical care to a minor. 600,000 witnesses to what could be classified as reckless endangerment. 600,000. The number seems impossible. But this is 2025. This is the age where injustice doesn't happen in the shadows anymore. It happens in HD, in real time, with hashtags and shares and the entire world watching. Hashtag Delta discrimination is trending #1 in the United States. Hashtag Let Emma Breathe is going viral. Hashtag Justice for Emma is spreading across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. A teenage girl's worst moment is becoming the internet's rallying cry. Susan is crying now. Actual tears. Her career flashing before her eyes. 12 years of service. The pension she was working toward. The pride she took in her uniform. All of it evaporating because she made assumptions. Because she saw a black teenager in a hoodie and decided she knew everything she needed to know. Please, Susan whispers, I was just trying to keep the flight safe. Safe. Dr. Chen's voice cuts in, and he's not gentle anymore. I'm a physician. I identified myself as a physician. I told you she was having a real medical emergency, and you ignored me. You called for TSA instead. Tell me, Ms. Miller, what part of your training said to ignore a doctor's medical assessment? Susan has no answer for that. Emma's breathing is getting worse. Her lips are taking on a slightly blue tint. Dr. Chen sees it, and his voice gets urgent. Captain Carter, with all due respect, we need that inhaler back in your daughter's hands in the next 60 seconds, or we're going to need to call paramedics. Give my daughter her medication. Now." Captain Carter's voice leaves no room for discussion. Susan's hand is shaking as she extends the inhaler toward Emma. But Dr. Chin steps between them. "I'll take it," he says firmly. "And I'll be documenting this entire incident for the medical board and the FAA." He takes the inhaler, checks it's the right medication, albuterol sulfate, standard rescue inhaler, and hands it to Emma. "2 puffs," he says gently. "Nice and slow. I've got you." Emma brings the inhaler to her lips. Press. Breathe in. Hold. The medication hits her constricted airways and begins to work. Press again. Breathe. Hold. Slowly, slowly the tightness begins to ease. The panic starts to recede. She can breathe. She can actually breathe. The relief on her face is visible even through the tears. "Baby?" Captain Carter's voice comes through the phone. "You okay? Talk to me." I'm okay, Dad." Emma manages between breaths. "The inhaler's working." "Good. Good girl. Now I need you to stay calm, stay seated, and let Dr. Chin monitor you. I'm walking to your gate right now." The entire cabin can hear his footsteps through the phone. Quick, purposeful strides. This is a man on a mission. ETA, 2 minutes, he says, and then his voice shifts to official mode. "This is Captain Carter to Gate Crew, Flight 447. I need this aircraft held at the gate. No departure clearance until I arrive. Medical emergency and crew misconduct. Confirm receipt." Through the phone, they hear a crackling radio response. "Confirm, Captain. Aircraft is grounded pending your arrival." Susan sinks into a nearby seat. She's not crying anymore. She's just sitting there, staring at nothing, knowing her life is about to change forever. Around her, passengers are still filming, still posting, still sharing. Tina leans into her live stream camera. "You guys, Emma's breathing is getting better." But her father, the chief of flight operations, is literally walking to this gate right now. "I've never seen anything like this." The comments on her stream are flying by too fast to read. "Susan about TO get fired. This is why we need body cams on flight attendants. That poor baby. I'm crying. The dad's voice gave me chills. Justice is coming, and it's wearing a pilot uniform." Emma closes her eyes and focuses on breathing. In and out. In and out. The medication is working, but the emotional toll is hitting her now. The humiliation, the fear, the grief she was already carrying. And now this. Dr. Chun sits next to her, monitoring her pulse, watching her breathing pattern. "You're doing great," he says softly. "Color's coming back. Respiratory rate is improving." "Thank you," Emma whispers. "Thank you for believing me." "Sweetheart, I'm sorry I had to," Dr. Chin says, and there's anger in his voice, not at her, but at the situation. "You shouldn't have needed someone to believe you. Your medical device and ID should have been enough." And then they hear it. Footsteps in the jetway. Quick, purposeful, coming closer. The door to the aircraft is still open, and through it walks a man in a Delta pilot's uniform. For stripes on his shoulders, captain, tall, dignified, with silver at his temples and eyes that miss nothing. Captain William Carter, Emma's father. The cabin erupts in whispers. Phones come up. Cameras recording. He walks past first class, where his daughter should have been sitting. Past business class. Through the curtain to the main cabin. And when he sees Emma sitting there in 23F, something crosses his face. Not just anger. Something deeper. The pain of a father seeing his child hurt. The fury of a man who knows exactly what his daughter just went through. But he's professional first. Always professional. He goes straight to Emma and Dr. Chun. "I'm Captain Carter," he says to the doctor, extending his hand. "Thank you for helping my daughter." "Dr. Henry Chun, retired surgeon. Your daughter's respiratory status is stabilizing. But, Captain, she needs to be monitored. And frankly, She needs to file a formal complaint. Captain Carter nods. Then he kneels down next to Emma's seat, and for just a moment, the powerful airline executive disappears, and there's just a dad checking on his little girl. "Hey, baby," he says softly. "Let me see you breathe." Emma takes a breath. It's shaky but functional. "Good. That's good." He cups her face in his hands. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. This should never have happened. Do you understand me? This was wrong." Emma nods, tears flowing again. But these are different tears. Relief tears. Safe tears. Her dad is here. Captain Carter stands. And when he turns to face Susan Miller, his expression changes. Now, he's not a father. He's the chief of flight operations for one of the world's largest airlines. He's the person responsible for safety, policy, and conduct across thousands of flights daily. And one of his employees just endangered his child. "Ms. Miller," he says, his voice carrying through the cabin, "please stand." Susan stands on shaking legs. "In the last 30 minutes, you have committed multiple violations. You illegally confiscated a prescribed medical device from a minor. You ignored a medical professional's assessment. You filed a false report suggesting drug possession. You violated ADA protections. And you did all of this while being recorded and broadcast to hundreds of thousands of people." He pauses, letting each word sink in. "You have two options. Option 1, you resign immediately effective today with a neutral reference and no mark on your permanent record. Option 2, you face immediate termination, legal charges for reckless endangerment of a minor, a federal investigation, and a civil rights lawsuit." The silence is absolute. "You have 60 seconds to decide," Captain Carter says. Susan is crying hard now. I didn't mean, I thought, what did you think?" Captain Carter's voice is quiet but cuts like glass. "What did you see when you looked at my daughter that made you think she was lying? That made you think she was a criminal? That made you ignore every piece of evidence she gave you?" Susan can't answer, because they both know. Everyone in that cabin knows. She saw a black girl in a hoodie and made assumptions. Assumptions that could have killed someone. "I'm sorry," Susan whispers. "I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize to me," Captain Carter says. "Apologize to her." He points to Emma. Susan walks on unsteady legs to where Emma is sitting, gets down on her knees right there in the aisle. "Emma," she says, voice breaking, "I am so deeply sorry. What I did was wrong. It was cruel. It was based on prejudice I didn't even know I had. I could have killed you. I could have." She breaks down completely. Emma looks at this woman who humiliated her, who endangered her, who saw her as a threat instead of a child in pain. And Emma does something that shocks everyone. "I forgive you," she says quietly, "but you need to do better. You need to never treat another person like this again." That moment, a 16-year-old girl showing grace to the woman who wronged her, that moment gets clipped and shared 50 million times over the next week. Susan reaches into her pocket with trembling hands, pulls out her employee badge, her wings pin, 12 years of service. She places them in Captain Carter's hand. "I choose option 1, she whispers. Captain Carter nods. "Security will escort you off the aircraft. You'll receive your final paperwork within 48 hours. 2 airport security officers appear. They've been waiting in the jetway. They gently take Susan by the arms and lead her off the plane. As she walks past Emma one last time, she stops. "Thank you," she says, "for forgiving me. I don't deserve it." "No," Emma says quietly. "You don't. But maybe it'll help you become someone who does." And then Susan Miller is gone. Captain Carter addresses the entire cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this delay. What happened here today was completely unacceptable. This flight will be delayed approximately 45 minutes while we get a new lead flight attendant and while my daughter receives proper medical clearance to fly." He pauses. "Delta Airlines does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We do not tolerate medical negligence. And we do not tolerate the mistreatment of minors. What you witness today will result in immediate policy changes across our entire airline. Applause breaks out in the cabin. Actual applause. Tina calls out from across the aisle, "Captain Carter, your daughter is a hero. We've been streaming this whole thing." Captain Carter looks at Tina's phone at the view count, now over 1 million, and something like grim satisfaction crosses his face. "Good," he says simply. "Let them watch. Let the whole world watch. Because this is the last time this will ever happen on a Delta flight." Dr. Chin stands and extends his hand again. "Captain, I'd like to help. I'm retired, but I still have my medical license. If Delta is serious about policy changes, I'd like to be part of that conversation." "I'm counting on it," Captain Carter says. "We're going to make sure no other child ever goes through what my daughter just did." He turns back to Emma. "Baby, I'm going to ride in the jump seat for this flight. I'm not leaving you." "Okay." Emma nods, still shaky but breathing normally now. "And we're moving you back to 2A where you belong." "Dad," Emma says softly, "I don't want first class anymore. Can I just stay here?" Captain Carter understands. She doesn't want to walk through that cabin again. Doesn't want to feel those eyes on her. "Okay, baby, you stay right here. But this whole row is yours. No one else." He clears the row, upgrading those passengers to first class with apologies. Emma stretches out, Dr. Chun in the row behind her keeping watch. And as the plane finally pushes back from the gate, 53 minutes late, Emma Carter closes her eyes. She's going to her grandmother's funeral. She's going to say goodbye to the woman who told her she could change the world. And what Emma doesn't know yet, what none of them know yet, is that she already has. Because that video, that live stream, it's about to change everything. The plane is in the air. Emma is safe. Justice has been served. But this story is just beginning. Because what happens when millions of people see injustice in real time? When a moment of prejudice becomes a movement for change? When one girl's courage becomes a catalyst for revolution? By the time Flight 447 landed in Atlanta, the world had changed. Not the whole world, maybe, but the part of the world that watches, that shares, that speaks up when something is wrong. Emma's story was everywhere. Hashtag Delta discrimination had been trending for hours. Hashtag Let Emma Breathe had spread to 17 countries. Hashtag Justice for Emma was being shared by celebrities, politicians, civil rights activists, and millions of ordinary people who saw themselves or their children in that scared 16-year-old girl. Tina's live stream had been viewed over 15 million times. Clips of Captain Carter's confrontation had been replayed on every major news network. That moment when Emma said, "I forgive you," 50 million views and counting. The internet doesn't usually agree on anything. But on this, the internet was united. What happened to Emma Carter was wrong. And something had to change. When the plane touched down in Atlanta, Emma looked out the window and saw something unexpected. News vans, dozens of them. Cameras, reporters. A crowd of people holding signs. "We stand with Emma. Breathing while black is not a crime. Asthma is not suspicious." Her father, sitting in the jump seat where he'd stayed for the entire flight, saw it too. "Baby," he said gently, "there are going to be reporters out there. You don't have to talk to anyone. You don't owe anyone your story. We can go straight to the funeral." "Okay." Emma nodded. She was exhausted, emotionally drained. She just wanted to see her family, to mourn her grandmother in peace. But as they deplaned, Captain Carter beside her, Dr. Chin walking with them as a protective presence, Emma saw something that changed her mind. A young black girl, maybe 10 years old, standing with her mother near the gate. The girl was holding an inhaler in one hand and a sign in the other. The sign said, "Thank you, Emma. You made me feel brave." Emma stopped walking, just stopped right there in the terminal. That little girl saw her and burst into tears. Happy tears. Grateful tears. Emma walked over to her, knelt down, and said, "What's your name?" "Aaliyah," the girl whispered. "Aaliyah, that's a beautiful name." Emma smiled through her own tears. "You don't have to be afraid to use your inhaler, okay? It's your medicine. You deserve to breathe." The mother was crying too. "Thank you," she said to Emma. "Thank you for being brave." And that's when Emma realized something. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was bigger than her. It belonged to every person who'd ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Every kid who'd been accused of lying about their medical conditions. Every person who'd been judged by the color of their skin before anyone even knew their name. She turned to the waiting reporters. "I'll make a statement," she said quietly to her father. Captain Carter held a brief press conference right there in the terminal. Emma stood beside him, still in her thrift store hoodie, still with red eyes from crying. The cameras clicked and flashed. Microphones pushed forward. "My name is Emma Carter," she began, her voice stronger than she felt. "And today I almost died because someone made assumptions about who I am based on what I look like." The crowd went silent. I didn't do anything wrong. I had a ticket. I had my medication. I had a medical ID bracelet. But none of that mattered, because someone looked at me and decided I was lying, decided I was dangerous, decided I didn't deserve basic human dignity. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "But here's what I want you to know. This isn't just about me. This is about every person who's ever been treated like they don't belong in spaces they paid to be in. Every person who's had their medicine questioned. Every person who's been made to feel like a criminal for existing." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "I forgave the person who hurt me. But forgiveness doesn't mean nothing changes. Forgiveness means we do better. We have to do better." The terminal erupted in applause, not just from the reporters, but from travelers, from airport workers, from people who'd stopped to watch. Captain Carter stepped forward. "Delta Airlines will be making a major announcement in the next 72 hours regarding policy changes. But let me be clear, what happened to my daughter should never have been possible, and we're going to make sure it never happens again." 2 days later, Emma stood in a small church in Atlanta saying goodbye to her grandmother, the woman who'd braided her hair, the woman who'd made the best peach cobbler, the woman who'd told her she could change the world. During the service, Emma gave a eulogy. She talked about her grandmother's strength, her wisdom, her love, and then she said something that made everyone in that church sit up a little straighter. "Grandma used to tell me that sometimes God puts us in hard places so we can make them softer for the people who come after us." I didn't understand what she meant, but I think I do now. She looked out at the faces, family, friends, people who'd known her grandmother for decades. What happened to me on that plane? That was hard. That was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. But Grandma would tell me to take that hard thing and make it count, to make sure nobody else has to go through what I did. Her voice strengthened. "So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this pain and turn it into change. I'm going to make sure my grandmother's belief in me wasn't for nothing." There wasn't a dry eye in the church, and Emma Carter, 16 years old, stood at that pulpit and became something more than a victim of injustice. She became a voice for change. 72 hours after the incident, exactly as Captain Carter promised, Delta Airlines held a press conference. Captain Carter stood at a podium, flanked by the CEO, the head of HR, and Dr. Henry Chin. 3 days ago, one of our passengers experienced something that should never happen on any airline. Captain Carter began. A minor with a documented medical condition was denied access to life-saving medication. This was unacceptable, and today, we're announcing comprehensive reforms to ensure it never happens again. The changes were sweeping: emergency medical device recognition training. Every flight attendant would complete 40 hours of mandatory training on common medical devices, conditions, and emergency protocols. The training would include bias recognition and de-escalation techniques. zero-tolerance policy. Any employee who confiscated, questioned, or denied access to a properly identified medical device would face immediate termination. No warnings. No second chances. The medical alert system. Delta was launching a new app feature that would allow passengers to register medical conditions during check-in. This information would be immediately visible to the flight crew, color-coded by urgency. Independent Medical Review Board. A panel of physicians, led by Dr. Chen, would review all medical-related incidents and have the authority to recommend policy changes. Monthly bias audits. Every crew would undergo regular reviews to identify and address potential discriminatory patterns in passenger interactions. But the real shock came next, and finally Captain Carter said, looking directly into the camera, "We're offering this entire policy framework to every airline in America. Free. Open source. Because this isn't about competition. This is about keeping people safe." The press conference room erupted with questions, but Captain Carter had one more thing to say. "To be clear, these changes are happening because my daughter had the courage to speak up, but they should have happened long before she ever needed to. We failed Emma. We failed our passengers, and today, we're committing to never failing anyone like this again." Within a week, United Airlines announced they were adopting Delta's protocols, then American Airlines, then Southwest, then JetBlue. Within a month, every major airline in the United States had implemented some version of the medical alert system. International carriers started reaching out. Air Canada, British Airways, Lufthansa, Emirates, the TSA, which had been called to arrest Emma for having an inhaler, announced new training requirements for all agents regarding medical devices. The FAA updated their guidelines. Medical schools started using the incident as a case study in patient advocacy and implicit bias. Business schools added it to their curricula on corporate crisis management. Law schools examined it through the lens of civil rights and disability law. Emma Carter's 18 Minutes of Hell on Flight 447 became required reading for anyone studying transportation, civil rights, or emergency medicine. Emma Carter, now 17 and a freshman at MIT, sat before the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. She wore a simple black dress. Her natural curls were styled neatly. But her eyes, those eyes carried the weight of someone who'd seen both the worst and best of humanity. "Thank you for inviting me to testify today," she began, her voice clear and strong. She told her story. Every detail. The looks. The humiliation. The inhaler being ripped from her hands. The struggle to breathe. But then she talked about the changes. In the 6 months since the incident, Delta has reported a 78% reduction in medical discrimination complaints. The Medical Alert app has been used by over 2 million passengers, and the training programs have been adopted by 12 major airlines worldwide. She pulled up a slide. She'd prepared a presentation like she was defending a thesis. "But here's what the numbers don't show," Emma continued. "They don't show the little girl at the airport who felt brave. They don't show the elderly man with diabetes who told me he can now fly without anxiety. They don't show the mother with a child on the autism spectrum who said the medical alert system changed their lives." She looked around the room at senators, staff members, and journalists. "What happened to me was terrible, but it became something powerful. It became proof that when we speak up about injustice, when we refuse to accept that's just how things are, we can change the world." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "My grandmother used to say that sometimes God puts us in hard places so we can make them softer for the people who come after us. I understand that now. I live that." Emma's voice grew passionate. "But here's the thing. We shouldn't have to wait for viral videos to make things right. We shouldn't need millions of views and outrage to get basic human dignity. We should build systems that protect people from the beginning." She pointed to the data on her slides. "These reforms work. They save lives. They prevent discrimination. And every airline, every transportation system, every public space should adopt them. Not because it's good PR, not because it's trending, but because it's right. The committee gave her a standing ovation. Senator Mitchell, who'd been taking furious notes, leaned into her microphone. Ms. Carter, you mentioned you're studying aerospace engineering at MIT. What's your goal? Emma smiled. I'm developing a biometric monitoring system that can detect medical distress before a passenger even realizes they're in danger. Elevated heart rate, respiratory changes, blood oxygen levels, all monitored passively through seat sensors and alerts sent directly to flight crew with recommended interventions. She pulled up another slide showing her prototype. It's still in development, but my goal is that no one should ever have to advocate for themselves while they can't breathe. The plane should do it for them. Senator Williams shook his head in amazement. You're 17 years old. Yes, sir. And I almost died at 16. That's pretty good motivation to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. The room erupted in applause again. 1 month after Emma's congressional testimony, Delta made another announcement. Captain William Carter was promoted to Vice President of Inclusive Operations, a newly created position overseeing diversity, accessibility, and safety reforms across the entire company. Dr. Henry Chun, the retired surgeon who'd rushed to help Emma, was named Chief Medical Advisor, leading the new Medical Review Board. Tina Ramirez, the woman who'd live-streamed the incident, was brought on as a consultant for social media crisis management and passenger advocacy. The little girl Emma had met at the airport, Aaliyah, became the face of Delta's new Breathe Easy campaign, which educated families about traveling with medical conditions. And Emma? Emma was named to the advisory board of 3 major airlines, a consultant for the FAA, and a youth ambassador for the American Medical Association, all while maintaining a 4.0 GPA at MIT. A year after the incident, someone compiled all the clips: the confrontation, Captain Carter's arrival, Emma's forgiveness, her press conference, her congressional testimony, into a single video. It was titled The Girl Who Changed Aviation Forever, Emma Carter's Story. Within a week, it had 200 million views. The comment section was a testament to her impact. I have type 1 diabetes. Because of Emma, I flew for the first time in years without fear. Thank you. My son has epilepsy. The medical alert system probably saved his life last month. God bless this girl. I'm a flight attendant. Our new training opened my eyes to biases I didn't know I had. This story changed my career. Emma's grandmother would be so proud. That last comment made Emma cry when she read it, because that's all she ever wanted, to make her grandmother proud. 2 years after the incident, Emma Carter, now 19, was invited back to JFK Airport for a special ceremony. Delta was unveiling a new training center, the Emma Carter Center for Aviation Equity and Medical Safety. Emma stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of flight attendants, pilots, executives, and passengers whose lives had been touched by her story. When I boarded Flight 447, I was just a scared kid going to her grandmother's funeral, Emma said. I had no idea that the worst day of my life would become the catalyst for something beautiful. She gestured to the building behind her. This center will train thousands of aviation professionals every year. It will save lives. It will prevent discrimination. It will make flying safer for everyone. Emma paused, emotion catching in her throat. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to accept that injustice was inevitable. I'm someone who had people stand with me, my father, Dr. Chun, Tina, the passengers who filmed, the millions who shared the story. She looked directly into the cameras. Change doesn't come from one person. It comes from all of us deciding that we deserve better, that will demand better, that will build better. Emma's voice strengthened. So, if you're watching this and you've ever experienced discrimination, ever been told you don't belong, ever been made to feel like your pain doesn't matter, I want you to know something. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And when you speak up, you never know who you might inspire, who you might protect, what you might change. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. My grandmother told me I could change the world. I didn't believe her. But Grandma, you were right. And I hope I made you proud. The crowd erupted. Not just applause, but cheers. Standing ovation. People openly crying. Because Emma Carter, who'd once been a scared 16-year-old struggling to breathe in seat 23F, had done exactly what her grandmother said she would. She'd change the world. Years later, when Emma graduated from MIT with her doctorate in aerospace engineering, she gave a commencement speech that went viral all over again. She talked about that day on Flight 447, about fear and injustice and the feeling of being powerless. But then she said something that became one of the most quoted lines of the decade. Sometimes power has to protect, not punish. And when you see injustice, you only have two choices: record it or be part of it. Choose to record. Choose to speak up. Choose to stand. Because silence protects the wrong people. She paused, looking out at the graduating class. I was 16 years old when someone tried to take my breath away. But millions of people gave it back by refusing to look away, by demanding change, by believing that we could do better. Emma's voice filled with emotion. So here's what I want you to remember as you leave here today. You are more powerful than you know. Your voice matters more than you realize. And the systems that seem too big to change, they're not. They're just waiting for someone brave enough to push. She smiled through tears. Be that person. Push that system. Change that world. The crowd went wild. And somewhere, in whatever place grandmothers go when they leave this earth, a woman who used to make the best peach cobbler in Georgia smiled and whispered, "That's my girl. That's my beautiful girl." By 2027, the impact of Emma's story was undeniable. Medical discrimination complaints in aviation dropped 89%. Globally, the medical alert system was used by 47 million passengers worldwide. 78 countries adopted similar medical safety protocols. 0 deaths from medical device denial on commercial flights since the reforms. Emma's biometric monitoring system was in testing with 6 major airlines. 200 healthcare and discrimination lawsuits cited her case as precedent. But the most important number wasn't on any chart or graph. It was the number of people, young and old, black and white, sick and healthy, who boarded planes without fear because Emma Carter refused to stay silent. That number? Immeasurable. Emma Carter became Dr. Emma Carter, aerospace engineer, civil rights advocate, and the youngest person ever appointed to the National Transportation Safety Board. She married her college sweetheart, had 2 kids, and never stopped fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Captain William Carter retired as Executive Vice President of Global Operations for Delta, credited with transforming the industry's approach to diversity and medical safety. He spent his retirement giving talks at aviation schools and writing a book titled When Love Meets Leadership: Lessons from Flight 447. Dr. Henry Chin came out of retirement to revolutionize in-flight medical protocols. His work saved an estimated 847 lives in the first 5 years alone. He and Emma co-founded the Chin-Carter Foundation for Medical Advocacy. Tina Ramirez became one of the most sought-after social media consultants in the country, teaching organizations how to handle crises with transparency and humanity. She never forgot that hitting go live changed everything. Susan Miller never worked in aviation again. But 5 years after the incident, she reached out to Emma. They met for coffee. Susan had spent those years volunteering with civil rights organizations, doing the work to unlearn the biases that had nearly killed someone. Emma didn't become her friend, but she respected the effort. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, but the work still matters. Aaliyah, the little girl at the airport, grew up, and became a pediatric pulmonologist specializing in childhood asthma. She said Emma inspired her to make sure every kid could breathe easy. This story started with an injustice, with assumptions and prejudice, and a teenage girl who almost died because someone looked at her and decided she was lying. But it became something more. It became a reminder that change is possible, that speaking up matters, that one person's courage can create ripples that turn into waves. Emma Carter's 18 minutes of humiliation on Flight 447 became a turning point in civil rights and aviation history. What began as an act of racial profiling became a movement of awareness, reform, and justice. Emma's quiet courage, amplified by social media and her father's swift action, reshaped the future of airline safety and reminded the world that one person's strength can rewrite the rules for everyone. She was just 16, just a girl in a hoodie going to her grandmother's funeral. But she became a symbol, a catalyst, a force for change. And whenever someone boards a plane now and uses the medical alert system, whenever a flight attendant recognizes a medical device without question, whenever a child with asthma breathes easy at 30,000 feet, that's Emma's legacy. That's the girl who changed aviation forever. And that's the grandmother who told her daughter she could change the world and was absolutely beautifully right. So what about you? What injustice have you seen and stayed silent about? What system needs changing? What voice needs amplifying? Because Emma Carter wasn't extraordinary. She was just someone who refused to accept that discrimination was inevitable. Someone who had people willing to stand with her. Someone who believed that speaking up mattered. You have that same power. The question is, what will you do with it? Because somewhere right now there's a 16-year-old kid who needs someone to believe them, to stand up for them, to refuse to look away. Will you be that person? Will you record it or be part of it? Will you speak up or stay silent? Emma Carter chose courage. What will you choose? But really, it's just the beginning. This story is a reminder that justice isn't just about laws and policies. It's about human beings choosing to see each other's humanity. It's about speaking up even when your voice shakes. It's about believing that we can do better and then doing the work to make it happen. Emma Carter's story shows us that change is possible, that viral moments can become lasting movements, that one person's courage can protect millions. So, the next time you see injustice, remember this: you have a choice. You can look away, or you can be the person who changes everything. Choose wisely. Choose bravely. Choose to make your grandmother proud. Thank you for reading Emma's story. Now go write your own.